Jai Hind and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan. The 35-minute long telephonic conversation between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump actually has clarified several issues regarding the weaponizing of a trade deal that was claimed by Donald Trump, and also Uncle Sam's role in mediating the ceasefire or the pause in Operation Sindoor. Now, on a phone call on Wednesday on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada, Prime Minister Narendra Modi told President Trump that Bharat neither requested mediation nor discussed trade with the United States during Operation Sindoor against Pakistan's terror sites. This also comes as a clear rejection of Washington's claim that it ended a 4-day conflict between New Delhi and Islamabad by leveraging trade. There were multiple aspects to this. The 35-minute Modi-Trump call to PM Modi and Trump, they did not discuss trade. That was the message that was very clearly said, implied during the talks with J.D. Vance. PM told Donald Trump no talks with America on mediation with Pakistan. PM also told Trump ceasefire initiated at Pakistan's request. Ceasefire is also a pause in operations. That's Bharat's position even now. There is no permanent ceasefire. It's just a pause in operations. PM has also told President Trump that Bharat hasn't, doesn't and won't accept any mediation. This is a bilateral matter. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also further adding that there is a complete political consensus on the mediation matter. That means across the aisle, there is no doubt that there will be no third-party mediation, and the offer, although made by America on the table, is not accepted by Bharat. Some matters which were important for Bharat to clarify, that clarification has come, and it's happened leader to leader. And somewhere there has been a silence on this matter post that from the American side. What are the big takeaways? One, Bharat is determined to take action against terror. Second, Bharat will respond to Pakistan's bullet with a stronger bullet. Goli ka jawab gole se is what the PM had actually said. Won't accept third-party mediation in this matter at all. Diplomacy not over autonomy for Bharat. And Bharat paves its own path away from Western influence. So, despite being in Canada, and despite an invitation to visit America again, Bharat has said, no, Prime Minister has his own engagements and he's off to Croatia because we are not at anybody's beck and call. There will be formalities. Now it is President Trump's turn to come and visit Bharat, and it will be done in due course. Well, on an aside, there is an interesting facet that Asim Munir is in Pakistan around the same time, is in Washington DC for lunch on Wednesday. And why would Bharat want to be seen around the same time at the White House? This dehyphenation from Pakistan is something that Bharat has worked very, very actively. And perhaps that was also underlined here by ensuring that there is no sudden visit to the US of A. At this point, that dosti is not important. Dosti apni jagah, diplomacy, Bharat's identity, the truth, the facts of the matter are far greater, and this respect has to be mutual. Bharat is not going to be kowtowed or boxed in by any nation. Meanwhile, let's listen to the reactions.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons.
प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने जोर देकर कहा कि भारत ने न तो कभी मध्यस्थता स्वीकार की थी, न करता है और न ही कभी करेगा.
And all of a sudden you'll start seeing missiles of a different type, and we got it settled. I hope I don't walk out of here and 2 days later find out that it's not settled, but I think it is settled. And we talked to them about trade. Let's do trade instead of do war. And Pakistan was very happy with that, and India was very happy with that.
प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप को स्पष्ट रूप से कहा कि इस पूरे घटनाक्रम के दौरान कभी भी किसी भी स्तर पर भारत अमेरिका ट्रेड डील या अमेरिका द्वारा भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच मध्यस्थता जैसे विषयों पर बात नहीं हुई थी।
Meanwhile, closer home, the Congress party tried to politicize the phone call, but the BJP was quick to counter. Listen in.
वो जानकारी हमें मिली है, पर मेरा एक ही सवाल है कि राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप का बयान बिल्कुल अलग है। वो अलग है, ठीक है, अलग अलग देश अलग अलग बयान दे सकते हैं, पर हमारे प्रधानमंत्री विपक्ष के नेताओं से बातचीत से क्यों भाग रहे हैं? क्यों सर्वदलीय बैठक नहीं बुलाते?
बयान एक ऐसे राजनीतिक दल से आ रहे हैं जिनका झूठ प्रतिदिन सामने आता है।
Let's get a move on. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has now said in a national address that Iran will not surrender. President Donald Trump had demanded unconditional surrender. But Ayatollah Khamenei has now further warned that any US military intervention would lead in irreparable damage. On Tuesday, US President Donald Trump called the Supreme Leader an easy target and said that America's patience is wearing thin. He also demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. Trump is growing increasingly warm to using US military assets to strike Iranian nuclear facilities and souring on the idea of a diplomatic solution to end this entire conflict. The hawkish posture represents a shift in Trump's approach. Now, fresh satellite imagery reveals a significant concentration of US military aircraft and bombers on the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, including the strategic B-52 bombers, KC-135 tankers and F-15 fighters, and a C-5M heavy transport aircraft. This is a build-up signaling enhanced readiness for a potential operations amid regional tensions. US has deployed the B-52 bombers stationed at Diego Garcia Air Base, Indian Ocean, long-range subsonic jet. That's what it is. Powered bomber capable of carrying up to 32,000 kilograms of weaponry. Planes can carry nuclear weapons. Planes can carry precision-guided bombs. They have a range of 14,200 kilometers. So Diego Garcia is just about 3,000 kilometers away from Tehran. So this is an easy go and come back for them. But more importantly, these are the aircrafts that can handle the payload of the bunker busters. Iran's nuclear base, Fordo, this is around 262 to 295 feet below the ground. This is the place where the uranium enrichment is happening, and that's the cause for concern both for Israel, America, and also the G7 nations. Rest of the G7 nations, this uranium enrichment is what is worrying them. And Fordo is so deep buried in the ground, it's not easy. It's like a fortress there. It's called the entire region of doom. It is 100 kilometers away from the capital of Tehran. The entire region is is very mountainous. It is safe from any aerial bomb threat, and it's not easy to penetrate this nuclear base because this deep under the earth, surrounded by mountains. Now, Iran's nuke facility, Fordo, is that on US target. What's the strength? The American strength is the B-2 Spirit bomber aircraft, which can fly with the highest payload weapon. It can be used to destroy underground nuclear facility, and the aircraft can fly with America's most powerful bomb, the GBU-57AB. It's called the bunker buster. The weight of this bomb itself is 13,600 kilograms. And that's why the B-52 bomber, because it can carry 2 or 3 payloads of bunker buster. It can penetrate up to 61 meters below ground. That's about 200 feet. So two bunker busters at the same target means that they can go up to 150 meters, and that is enough to reach the Fordo nuclear facility of Iran. It can cause destruction up to 61 meters, that is above 200 feet inside ground. So 2 of these at the same point, that's where the problem is. Now, if the Israelis get these bunker busters, do they have B-52s of their own? And is this all coming up to a place where the nuclear enrichment ability and those facilities will be destroyed? Russia itself has said that we are millimeters away from nuclear catastrophe. Meanwhile, amid calls for a regime change in Iran, the Shahs of Iran are in focus. Raza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran, Iran's last Shah, toppled in 1979 Islamic Revolution, reiterated his call for a regime change in Tehran. He said that we've got an alternative plan in place already, adding that the Islamic Republic is collapsing and the time has come for the Iranian people to reclaim Iran. Raza Pahlavi on a post on X said that Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has gone into hiding underground and lost control of the country, describing the moment as irreversible. The end of Islamic Republic is the end of its 46-year war against the Iranian nation, he wrote, adding, now is the time to rise. What is going to happen? Is a regime change imminent? Let's go across to our guests. Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author, scientist, political commentator with us. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey back with us, former GOC 15 Corps of the Indian Army, had a very interesting take and perspective on this entire conflict as we were speaking with him on Tuesday and on Monday. And Major Dan Pfefferman, retired former IDF and foreign policy expert, is with us. My namaste to everybody. Jai Hind. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to start with you, Major Dan. Your thoughts, is this what the focus is? The bunker busters and actually destroying Iran's nuclear capability? Is Fordo the main concern now? And if that is destroyed, will the regime change happen? Or is it a different combination where if you have the Khamenei eliminated, a regime change happens and this nuclear enrichment and these facilities then come under Western control?
Yeah, thank you. We have a number of different questions in play here. First of all, it's clear to everyone, nuclear experts, that Fordo is the main enrichment site, but it's not the only piece of the Iranian nuclear puzzle. And so what Israel has been doing over the last week essentially is taking out different pieces of the puzzle, of course, in Natanz and other enrichment sites, and having a nuclear program or fuel enrichment doesn't help on its own. You have to be able to move it around. You have to be able to put together advanced testing. You have to weaponize it. You have to fit it onto a ballistic missile. And so what Israel is doing is significantly degrading the entire supply chain, let's call it, of what it takes to put together a nuclear weapon, of which Fordo is a key piece, but it is not the only piece. It is recognized that the United States, with these bunker busters and the B-52s that are needed to carry them, is the only country in the world that has such capacity. Of course, the United States and President Trump, with his America First approach, has made it clear that he wants to get America out of unnecessary wars. And I believe what he thinks he can achieve with diplomacy and, of course, threats. Let's be absolutely clear, and we have with us a respected general in the Indian military will be able to verify this. Military threats and posturing and putting such pieces as the Americans are doing into place is a key part of diplomacy. If you can get your adversary to dismantle their nuclear program, because that is really the key goal, is the dismantling of the nuclear program via diplomatic means, using Israeli attacks to build up pressure to weaken the regime, using the posturing of significant American forces, then what better way to do it? And I think that's what the Americans are really doing. That said, and I'll just end with this, when push comes to shove, and if the Iranians do not back down on this, it is not out of question to see the Americans employing these B-52s to once and for all take out Fordo.
But Major Dan, if I may just push you a bit more, the Iranians don't seem to be backing down. There's not going to be any surrender. And the Ayatollah has come on a televised address where there are claims that he's hiding, he's gone into hiding, he's no longer in Iran, he's escaped to Moscow, etc. There was a televised address just a few hours ago.
Yes, and I'm not surprised that to see the Iranian leadership talking in such bluster, such machismo and bravado. However, at the same time, they are under significant pressure. There are reports that they have been talking to the Russians to provide the regime leadership and the elites a way out of Iran and to receive some kind of safe haven in Russia, as happened with the Assad family when that regime fell not long ago. And at the same time, you are seeing already reports of mid-level and even senior-level figures in the IRGC and in the regime hinting whether it's to Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, that they are not necessarily on board with the supreme leader, and that they will go, if there's a regime change, they will go with that regime. It's my sense in general that a lot of the mid-level and even senior to mid-level functionaries in Iran are not really ideologically committed, as is the supreme leader in his immediate circle. And so if push comes to shove, and if the supreme leader, if I was his advisor, I would advise him to at least pretend to play ball and be to show that famous Iranian strategic patience that they've been known for all these years. If they don't do that, I think we very well could see imminent regime change, brought from within, by the way, not from without.
Well, but a regime change cannot be done from without. It has to happen from within, because anything that is done from without does not last long, and it's only further detrimental to the geopolitics and stability of the entire region. General Pandey, your thoughts?
Yeah, so Anand, while there is no representative of Iranians sitting in this panel today, so let me just bat from politico-military religious perspective. Okay, firstly, I don't think Israel has got a political mission capability in this entire thing. They have got a military mission capability, and whatever they have done pretty well till now. The surprise part, the taking out of the top leadership, taking off of Natanz. But I think their end state in this entire process was to ensure that they carry out destruction of the nuclear facilities and of course the top leadership. So what I look at it, that they have achieved a partial mission in which a most critical facet, that is a Fordow base, is still left. Now I feel that in case they are smart, and I'm sure they must be wondering how to do it, they may not be able to use, even if they use B-52s, B-2s, these bombers and those GBU bombs, the possibility of a success with the number of aircrafts available and the bombs available is slightly doesn't match. I'm sure they must have carried out certain degree of planning. They may require to use certain assets. They may be radiation based, it may be chemical based, to deny the value of death to anybody hereinafter if they fail. I think that is the only way. Today they have achieved a partial mission. Their capability to achieve military mission is only completed once they are able to deny Fordow base. The second comes to regime change, the political mission. That capability exists today only in the entire world. It exists only with America, right? With the deep state, their CIA, their State Department working the way they work. They throw money. The only capability of regime change exists with the US. Israel in this may provide a second a supporting role. Iran is not so easy. It is not Bangladesh, right? That you can put in Yunus there. Iran has been a very, very radicalized environment, but it is in terms of religion. So there are a large number of stakeholders there. If you just take out Ayatollah Khomeini, doesn't mean it will crumble, the cookie will crumble, right? The grip of IRGC, when you remove the first layer, the second layer, the third layer will always remain, because eventually the senior people of that country who actually control everything have got a viewpoint, a religious viewpoint, right? So while the younger generation may want, right, a change, a modernity environment, but that enabling environment can be only brought out by Americans, and I think they must be having some say there. As of now, it doesn't look. What can happen is that only with encouragement of Russia, certain degree of role of Chinese, and very important, the French, right? This change is possible to be established in this thing. When you have to look into, history repeats itself, right? You have to use the same thing which was done about 46 years back. Maybe that is how they can do. Now coming very important to Iran. What was the role of Iran? They had a politico-religious military angle in this entire thing. Iranians always believed in their superior past and everything, and they possibly their major mistake has been to bind the entire country and to lead the Islamic Ummah. They wanted to keep on targeting Israel. I wish possibly somewhere 10 years back, 5 years back, they had changed the posture that coexistence of Israel is something not negotiable. They can always negotiate a coexistence. This entire thing of the nuclear enrichment facility, their fixation with it, has been towards that end to take a lead in the entire Islamic nation, because none of them has the scientific temper or capability or technical know-how to be able to carry out enrichment of uranium facility. The Pakistani lie has been now exposed post Op Sindoor, I guess. We will not talk of it. So they are the only country, and they were very, very closer to it. So when this point with the Major brings out is very pertinent. While Americans may want diplomacy to avert war, you may avert, but you will only delay war, right? And this is what the Iranians have been pushing: negotiate, fall back, negotiate, fall back. And now when they were at the cusp of making the breakthrough, I think Israelis, I will not like to back from either side, but Israelis had no option today but to go for the strike. In case they had delayed any more time, this would not have been achievable.
But General Sahab,
right? So I just thought that
no, you put matters in Iran, fantastic perspective here. But the other thing, the fact is that within Iran, over the last 1.5, 2 years, if not more, there has been multiple uprisings. One was against this entire hijab enforcement. There is also the rise of the Avestan and the old Iranian roots, the ancient Iranian roots, the Avesta roots from where Zoroastrianism emerged, and we have the Parsis who find their roots from Iran. A lot of the Sayyidis who are here, they have their ancestral roots from Iran. And it was a very different equation at that time. And the Shias were seen to be quite modern, contrary to the very closed and perhaps a very fundamentalist face that Iran projects to the world. Within Iran, they're supposed to be a very modern society. Although the IRGC and under the Khomeini, how things changed between the 70s to now is a different point. But Professor Ranganathan, do you believe there is enough within Iran to perhaps change 30% perhaps of the population which backs the Khomeini to the hilt? Will the other 50-60%, if not more, turn up, and can there be a regime change from within, as Major Dan was saying? Or will this entire military action that forces the Khomeini to flee push a vacuum in Iran, which is going to further destabilize this entire region?
A fantastic set of questions. Good evening, Anand, and good evening to my fellow panelists. I speak here as a layman because there are two experts on your panel. 3 points very briefly. Number one, in fact, I'd like to answer encompassing all the 3 questions that you've asked in a composite way. So first, trusting America and Donald Trump is like trusting Dracula at a blood donation camp. The fact of the matter is that everyone is on his own. In fact, as the old rogue Kissinger once said, it is dangerous to have America as an enemy, but it is fatal to have America as a friend. And, the couple of things out here, be that as it may, that's about America. When it comes to Israel, I 100% stand with Israel, and India must and has to stand with Israel for the simple reason that Israel has always stood with India. Even when in 1971 Indo-Pak war, most of the Arab nations, so-called our friends, including when Nehru said, Nasser and I share the same blood, and Indira Gandhi was so laudatory towards Sadat, Egypt stood with Pakistan. You had Iran supplying weapons to Pakistan. At that point of time, vital weaponry was provided by Israel. But we ditched Israel in the 1973 Yom War. The fact of the matter is Israel has always stood with us. Right now, Iran is antagonistic towards us. If you look at the statements of their supreme leader Khamenei, as far as Kashmir is concerned, he's asking Muslims around the world to stand up and fight and support the freedom struggle of Muslims in Kashmir. So Iran is no friend anymore. Possibly it never was. The fact of the matter is Israel is, and out here Israel is fighting the good fight. So we have to back Israel not only because it's a friend, but also because it is a moral fight that it is fighting for all of us. Now, number 2, let me return unfortunately to America. President Trump is absolutely right when he says that a one-party dictatorial state that suppresses its population brutally, that has brutal, all-encompassing censorship, all-encompassing surveillance, that punishes dissenters with public executions in stadiums, that suppresses everything, that has industrial-scale espionage on other industries of other friendly countries, that has its neighbors, that threatens with war, should not have a nuclear bomb. He's right. Which begs the question, why is he having trade tariff negotiations with exactly such a state, China? Look at the duplicity out here. But I come to the third point, which is what you began your question with, regime change. Anand, I don't want to delve into modern history, but whenever America or anybody else has orchestrated a regime change, India and other nations have been left to pick up the pieces. I'll just mention 3 states. Number 1, Afghanistan. Look what has happened to Afghanistan after regime change. Look what has happened to Syria when America orchestrated regime change. In fact, the current head of Syria had a $10 million bounty on his head, and he's shaking currently, hands with President Trump. And let's not even go to Gaddafi and Libya. There have been no elections in Libya for the last 11 years. In fact, it is almost a slow and simmering civil war that is happening out there. It is divided neatly into 2 factions, 2 tribes. So I don't know whether a regime change is a good thing or not. History tells you that it is never a good thing, because Americans simply commit regime change and run away from there. And what is the benefit that India will have is something that we have to stand and decipher, because let's be very honest, we stand alone out here.
So does Israel. In this case, there is a doctrinal position between 2 nations. People would ask, I asked this question, if Israel can have nuclear weapons, why can't Iran? And Major Dan answer that question, because there are many who ask this question. You as a nation are a nuclear power. Why should you deny Iran uranium enrichment and nuclear ability? It's also signatory to NPT.
Supposedly, according to foreign sources. There's a very simple answer to that. I've been in this country for most of my life, certainly all of my adult life. I can't recall one public parade where the Israeli government and military marched in the streets parading weaponry and missiles that said death to Iran or death to any other country. You have in Iran on a regular basis a very messianic death cult that says death to America, death to Israel, and parades the weapons with which to achieve that. And so a country that regularly, even while its people suffer and have to choose between medicine or putting meat on the table, with crippling sanctions due to its illicit nuclear program, chooses to funnel some $1 billion a year into regional proxies that threaten my country. And so Israel has never acknowledged or threatened any country with destruction. It's never threatened to use these supposed nuclear weapons against anyone. And Iran, on the other hand, regularly not just threatens and calls my country a cancer that needs to be eliminated from the face of this earth. It is actively seeking those weapons, and it funds and arms and trains and operates a whole array of proxies, by the way, in a very cowardly manner. It hides behind the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, previously the Assad regime. They strike at Israel, not just since October 7th, but especially since October 7th. And then Iran sits back and says, that's not us. We didn't do anything. We're the victim here. And so if Iran is going to play that game, we cannot allow it. So
let's say it's doctrinal for Iran and its offshoots or its progenies in terms of Hamas, Houthis, proxies, if you were to say Hamas, Houthis. For them, death to Israel, eradication of Jews was part of their doctrine. Let's say that Iran, it's doctrinal, and that's the reason why the difference between a soldier and a terrorist is that both have a gun. One wields the gun to protect, the other one to kill. So perhaps that's but what happens here? What after you've bunker busted everything? Let's say, what after you have gone ahead and destroyed and set back Iran's nuclear program by about 2 decades or 3 decades? What after that? 3 decades later, Iran is only going to come back because a wounded Iran is far more dangerous.
Israel and Israel's foreign minister Gideon Sa'ar, even just recently in the press, in an interview on Fareed Zakaria, made very clear, we don't have the capacity to do regime change Certainly not in a country like Iran, which is some 20 times the size of Israel and 10 times the population. We can barely do a regime change in Gaza or in Lebanon, which were our neighbors and were much more powerful. So we need to be a little humble in this regard.
Right.
What we do need to remember and what we do need to set as our goal is that we will do everything in our power to push back the day that Iran can break out and achieve that dangerous weapon, the nuclear capacity. That is within our power, and that is why regime senior officials, the strategists, the nuclear scientists, and every aspect of the nuclear and ballistic missile program, and of course the proxy array, which we've already taken out, will be pushed back, and pushed back, until one day, and we hope the Iranian people will rise and retake their country, but that is not something that we can control. We can weaken the regime. We can certainly, and that's what we will do, is weaken their nuclear program and their ability to deliver such nuclear weapons.
Well, what happens in the neighborhood is not under your control, but if that neighborhood, what the neighborhood cannot do to you is something that you would like to control. So, in terms of politically internal and the external dynamic. Yes, Dr. Ranganathan, 30 seconds, and General Pandey, 30 seconds. I've got to move on after this. Yes.
I'm so sorry, just extended that. I think what the previous panelist with whom I agree much could not possibly say. I'll be blunt. I think what he's talking about is the doctrinal antagonism towards Israel. It stems from Islam. So let's be very honest about it. And it's not, the problem comes is, if you're denying a Muslim nation a nuclear bomb, there is another Muslim nation that already has a nuclear bomb. And in fact, Iran let it slip. In fact, one of the high-profile leaders there, that in case Iran is bombed with a nuclear weapon, Pakistan is going to bomb Israel. Of course, Pakistan denied it. But the fact is, America allowed a Muslim country to proudly display an so-called Islamic bomb. Their words, not mine. So the fact of the matter is, when it comes to doctrinal antagonism towards Jews and Israel, I'm afraid the Islamic countries already have a bomb, and it won't take long for nuclear proliferation to happen from Pakistan to Iran.
Well, with Pakistan, you don't know. They may just sell themselves to the highest bidder, as they always do, because Pakistan air bases are being perhaps somewhere used by the Americans, and that's why the soft pulling and mollycoddling that's happening, and General Munir is being hosted for a lunch there on Wednesday. General Pandey, 30 seconds, sir. We have to move on to the next story.
In 30 seconds, I'll take one very critical few seconds is that the most interesting statement came from Dr. Anand when he says that he's a layman in this panel. I think I've never heard much more absurd thing than this coming from him, because we all know his capabilities and capacities. Really honored to be here on the same panel. But very quickly, I'll just state a couple of points here that look, Israel and US may talk of anything with any other country. It can let down NATO, it can let down UK. But the symbiotic relationship with Israel and US has, it just cannot be broken, right?
Right.
The survival of Israel continues to remain contingent on the American backing, and there is a lot of mutualism. I will not get into a debate on this factor. So one is that. Second is, Iran today has lost all friends. The posturing of Khamenei, the way he has gone about, and the IRG's leadership, and what they have done in spite of talks which have happened with the Saudis. There's a time when the peace was about to come through in the region. What they have done through Hamas, Hezbollah, and in Syria has left them bereft of any friends. Russians can do nothing. They are busy in themselves. The Chinese have stepped off the grid. They can only provide some munitions, some stuff. But look at, they've got no strategic depth today to go. Syria is out of the hand. Hamas, Hezbollah gone out of the reckoning. The third H, Houthi, can only bluster talk that lakhs of people will march into Israel across this thing about 1,000 odd kilometers. They're all bluster. So when the radical elements talk, and another part unfortunate with Iran is that while it has got a massive organization, armed forces, everything, they are all meant for internal consumption, internal utilization. They are not boots on ground which can be applied to fight a war with another country, right? So that's they are also following a path of fighting a proxy war, right? Using terrorism as a state policy in form of Hamas, Hezbollah, and there are so many other elements operating in the umbrella of Iran. It is not only Iran.
Well,
which is doing.
I'm compelled to interrupt you here.
be
I'm compelled to interrupt you here because we have one of the students who will soon be back in Bharat. It's immense relief for Kashmiri students and their families as 90 students from Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, are set to arrive in New Delhi later tonight amid the evacuation operation facilitated by Bharat and the government here. Jammu and Kashmir Students Association has said they're grateful to the government of India, especially Prime Minister Narendra Modi and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar for launching this timely evacuation effort and for reassuring anxious families back home during this period of uncertainty. We remain hopeful that all remaining students will be evacuated soon, they said. Now, Indian student returning from Armenia, we have Tamheed who's joining us right now. Tamheed, namaste. Thank you for speaking with us. What's the current situation like in Iran, wherever you are, and now you got out of that? What's the situation there?
देखिए, जो अभी करंट सिचुएशन ईरान में है, इस सूरत हाल के लिहाज से तो जो हमारी पढ़ाई हम वर्क नहीं कर रहे थे, हमारा फोकस नहीं हो रहा था पढ़ाई पे
जी,
तो हम बहुत डिस्कसिव कंडीशन में थे वहाँ पे। तो वहाँ पे जो हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी की वर्क की क्लास थी वो भी सस्पेंड हो गई है। तो हमारे लिए ये ऑर्डर्स निकाले ऑफिस से, और इसलिए बेटर रहेगा कि अगर आप अपने कंट्रीज में डिपार्टमेंट। Right now we are going to our country. We are now at the International Airport. Good.
अच्छी बात है, लेकिन एक बात बताइए, व्हाट वाज योर एक्सपीरियंस आफ्टर दिस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बिगैन, और वहाँ पर भारतीय दूतावास का जो रेस्क्यू एफर्ट्स जो माउंट किया गया उसके बारे में ज़रा तफसील से बताएं।
We are very thankful to the Indian government. हमें यहाँ से इवैक्यूएशन के लिए जितने भी we're very thankful. We're very thankful.
What would you like to say to the government and also your fellow country people?
तो अभी हम तकरीबन 110 स्टूडेंट्स वापस आ रहे हैं जो हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी से, only 110 students that are going to be reporting now.
जी.
Only from one university.
Let's
Just
hope.
one university.
So let's hope that all the other students are also safely brought back. We've given to understand about 1,500 of them are there. But भारत आने के बाद कुछ instructions हैं आपके लिए? Some protocol, something that you have to follow? Have you been instructed?
तो अभी इसके बारे में हमारे पास कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं है। अभी जैसे मैंने बोला कि आपको दिल्ली देना है, फिर उसके बाद हमारे पास कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं है कि फाइनल डेस्टिनेशन का क्या रोल है। इसमें मैक्सिमम स्टूडेंट्स जो हैं जम्मू कश्मीर के हैं और 10-12 among 110 वो रेस्ट स्पीच हैं इंडिया के।
Well, good that you're back in Bharat very soon, and happy homecoming for you, and let's hope safe homecoming for all the others too. Thank you, Tamheed, for speaking with us. Thank you. A big development. A UK national audit on child sexual exploitation and abuse report throws spotlight yet again on grooming gangs in the United Kingdom. CNN News18 has exclusively accessed details of the report pertaining to cases of child sexual exploitation involved and that involved men, especially from Pakistani ethnicity and ethnic backgrounds. Largely, more than two-thirds, nearly 70% of the perpetrators were Pakistani origin or with Pakistani ethnicity. The chart shows the ethnic breakdown for a total of 323 designated CSAE. Child sexual abuse cases, suspects in Operation Stovehood, with nearly two-thirds recorded as coming from a Pakistani ethnic background, significantly higher than the proportion of South Yorkshire or Rotherham's Pakistan ethnic population. Now, the second pie chart also shows the ethnic breakdown for a total of 42 individuals convicted for CSAE offences under Operation Stovehood. Again, nearly two-thirds recorded as coming from Pakistani ethnic background. Now, despite reviews, reports and inquiries raising questions about men from Pakistani ethnic backgrounds, grooming gangs and also sexually exploiting young white girls. The system has consistently failed to fully acknowledge this or collect accurate data on ethnicity of these perpetrators so that this issue can be examined effectively. And this questions about ethnicity of these grooming gangs, and specifically whether they were predominantly men of Pakistani origin and have dominated the discussion of child sexual exploitation for many years. Those questions have been fundamental to the work of this audit that's now come out. Pandit Satish Sharma, author, with us. Dr. Anand Ranganathan stays on. Lieutenant General D.B. Pandey, former GOC 15 Corps, is also with us. And Bob Blackman, member of the UK Parliament, with us also. Namaste, Jai Hind to everybody. Thank you for your time. First to Bob Blackman itself. Bob, my first question is on the case report that came out. A lot of questions have been raised. This happened 2010 and even earlier, but it's taken a while for British authorities to not just to get to the bottom of it, but also to acknowledge that this is a serious problem. Your reaction?
Well, obviously, this is something that I was involved in on my select committee over the last 14 years prior to the general election, where we investigated the child sexual exploitation of young girls in Rotherham originally, but then extended to other places such as Rochdale and other parts, particularly of the North of the Midlands, where unfortunately, very sadly, young white British girls were literally ruthlessly exploited and by grooming gangs. And we had, at the time, we heard from the survivors, we heard from the victims. We also heard from Dame Louise Casey, who, of course, has just done this most recent report. Originally, the last government obviously had the Professor J report, which listed recommendations to be undertaken. What happened, and we've got to be clear on this, is that as a result of the J report, then a task force was set up, and as a result, more than 600 people or men were arrested and have been going through the courts since then. A lot of these cases that we're hearing about of criminal gangs that are now being sentenced for their crimes were caught by this process. So this has been going on for a long time. My former colleague, Anne Cryer, called this out back in 2003. So this is nothing. This is something that's not been happening just recently. This has been going on a very long period of time. And I think one of the biggest problems we've had in British society is the almost refusal to recognise the main perpetrators of this evil, and therefore, as a result of which, then this has been allowed to continue for far too long.
Well, but you spoke about the J report, you spoke about the KC report. There is also this independent report of July 2022. That's the Telford report, which was an independent study that said that nearly 1,000 children could have been exploited in Telford, in that region itself, between 1989 to 2017. That's a big number, and that this phenomenon is still on. Now, is it because British authorities, leaders didn't want to call out the ethnicity, worried because of a backlash, or is there something else which is systemic? Because even cops have come on record saying largely the arrests have been people of Pakistani origin, their ethnicity. Bob?
Well, there's two things. One is that obviously we've had, over the period of time that you mentioned, successive grooming gangs who have been brought to court. They've been found guilty. They've been sentenced to prison. Some of them, of course, have subsequently been released and go back into the community from which they came, in the same towns, which is, in my view, an outrage. These people should have been, in my view, they should have been deported. They should cease to be our nationals and indeed be deported back to Pakistan. And unfortunately, we've got a problem with human rights legislation, which is in some ways interfering with that process. So this has been a problem, and also, if I can say as well, we've got huge examples of young Indian girls, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, being exploited by these grooming gangs as well. So it is not confined to young white British girls. It is also to those of Indian, Sri Lankan and Bangladeshi extraction as well as possibly Pakistani extraction as well, that have been abused in this way. So what we've got to do is not only catch the perpetrators and punish them accordingly, but also get to the bottom of why it is that these men think it's acceptable to do this. That ethos is not acceptable in this country, nor should it be acceptable in any country at all. But clearly, there is an ethos that exists in amongst these men in the circles they mix in, to believe that it's perfectly acceptable to do this to young white British girls. And clearly, that is not acceptable. Full stop.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, you mentioned one of the things here is that only 7 local authorities, I believe, actually collected ethnicity data on those responsible for child sexual abuse, and therefore we've been reliant on and they did so because they didn't want to stir up community tensions. Well, I'm afraid this stirring up community tensions is not what this is about. This is about identifying these evil perpetrators.
Absolutely, and they are evil wherever they are, Pandit Satish Sharma. Why should, and this has happened across 50 regions in the United Kingdom, and Bob is saying that only 7 of them collect the ethnicity data of these perpetrators. Namaste, good to have you on the show after a while.
Namaste, Jai Shri Ram ji. My compliments to Bob also. He's one of the few parliamentarians who has been walking this walk alongside our community for a long period of time. Bob has mentioned Anne Cryer. She was actually talking about these issues 40 years ago. And I would just take your memories back to a time when the police abandoned the rights and the needs of Hindu girls and Sikh girls, so much so that there were riots in Southall and in Slough, physical riots, because the community had to resort to its own protection. At that time, the police were very high-handed and in their approach that this is just a problem amongst these dark people, we'll just let them get on with it, this is what they do. Now, Bob and I tried to address this issue over 7 years ago when there was a meeting that we called in Parliament, and Bob was very kind and courageous to host it, in which this issue was raised. Bhai Mohan Singh was giving documented evidence of many cases where this was still going on. This is only 7 years ago. And I invited Tapan Ghosh to provide the evidence of the data of the same phenomenon occurring in West Bengal, and he provided that data. The consequences of holding that event in Parliament, Bob really took a lot of criticism and a lot of heat, as did I. But now it's going to be established that, in fact, we were ahead of the curve. Right. To show you and to demonstrate for you exactly how deep this problem is, I would invite your researchers to offer money to Labour parliamentarians to come on your show to have this conversation. Okay, and if you offer them a substantial amount and they come on, I'm sure we can fundraise and we will pay whatever it is you charge them. They won't come on this show and they won't talk about this issue. When Baroness Casey's report came out, you know, the first thing that struck me was Baroness Casey has now joined the far right. Because she said, I am raging inside of me with what has happened and what is continuing to happen. Now, that's exactly the response that Prime Minister Starmer did not want to see, and that's what he used as evidence of the far right, that the far right are going to respond with anger and rage, and we must protect this vulnerable community from being tarnished and their name being sort of associated with this thing. Keir Starmer, I think, has actually destroyed the confidence that the British public has had in the British state, and it's gone to a level which is beyond recovery, if you ask me. You know, there are a couple of things that have happened. Baroness Casey's report, she is providing exactly the same information and presenting the same conclusions that Tommy Robinson was doing 20 years ago. This is the nature of the British state, and the long-suffering British public have had enough. If you have a look at the Twitter spaces that are being held, the comments that are being circulated, the meetings that are being called, and the response that's happening, there is now zero tolerance for the excuses that this government is going to be putting forward. And that is a devastating set of circumstances. Let me make one more small observation. Baroness Casey said that this report is not, the new inquiry is likely to conclude in 3 years' time. Okay? 3 years' time is another 3 years too long. This is the straw that's going to break the camel's back. I ask you, and I'm sure Bob may have an opinion, a report is presented, the findings are presented in 3 years, there is an election coming along 2 years, and even that is questionable with this current government. They are tampering with the roots of democracy at such a level. In 4 or 5 years' time, just before a general election, a Labour government is going to come up with some sort of a solution which is going to identify that the party itself, the parliamentarians themselves, that the bureaucracy itself, that the civil servants themselves, the police authority, the councillors have all been complicit as either enablers or they have been abetting and aiding or accessories after the fact to over 1 million individual criminal acts of abuse against young girls. Can there be anything more heinous? The global status, I don't think this, one last thing on energy, I don't think this government has understood that this is now an international issue. When Elon Musk tweeted and brought this attention to brought this to the attention of the global community, suddenly there is a new spotlight on this country. I don't think that the government have understood that this is no longer something that can be just sidestepped like it has done in the past.
1 million cases is not something which a nation like the United Kingdom should look the other way. And, Dr. Ranganathan...
Let me be very precise. 1 million individual criminal acts, in excess of 1 million, because many of these poor young girls had a criminal act inflicted upon them repeatedly by 40, 50 men at a time, many, many days at a time. And each and every one of those actually is a criminal act. Yes. And we have a young lady who, in a moment of outrage after the Southport massacre of 3 beautiful young girls, tweeted something, she regretted it and deleted it. And she's serving 31 months in prison for one potentially criminal act of public display.
So she is serving 31 months, but these perpetrators have not yet been, arrested. They have not been identified, named, and they have not been classified. Dr. Ranganathan and General Pandey. I've limited time, so quickly. Yes, please. General Pandey.
Yeah.
Dr. Ranganathan.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say that I have nothing but appreciation for Bob out here, who's done a yeoman's job for bringing this whole atrocity out. So thank you, Bob, for doing this for everyone around the world. It needed to be brought out. Having said that, I hope you take it sportingly, but I dare say, Anand, even Bob is not unaffected by the political correctness that unfortunately shrouds us, because in the 3 minutes that he talked about a lot of important stuff, he talked about the ethos, he talked about the psyche, but he did not mention what is the reason for that ethos that is allowing these gangs to do this. What is the dogma that is sanctioning them, this grooming? So I want to go a layer beyond just the crime, because I don't want to discuss the crime. I want to discuss the psychology that allows this crime to happen. And truth be told, Anand, we are living in a world where you believe what you see, but unfortunately what you see is written by those who see what they believe. Objectivity has become that metallic object that must be left behind before you pass through some electronic threshold. The biases don't beep anymore. We are a deeply polarized society, a deeply polarized world. This isn't objectionable, because polarization means you have a clash of ideas, that there is competition among them, and so it mirrors Darwinian evolution, science, religion, capitalism, communism, right wing, left wing. There's nothing wrong in professing diametrically opposite likes and dislikes and views, even if you hold entrenched views. But the problem comes when one party, one ideology, one dogma, one system controls the discourse or weighs in on it. That's when you stop being objective and start to play God. And that is what is happening around the world. Out of political correctness or virtue signaling or being co-opted by Islamists, journalists and politicians are scared to talk of Islam or Muslims, their practices, or indeed when Muslims perpetrate criminal acts, for fear of being branded Islamophobic. In fact, the irony is it is the Muslims who are Islamophobic. That is, they fear Islam. They fear to bring out the orders and the commandments of their holy book in its entirety on Jews, Christians, polytheists, homosexuality, apostasy, heresy, dress code, wife beating, blasphemy, because they fear being called illiberal. And this is what we saw in Britain when mass child rapes resulted from grooming of underage girls at the hands of Muslim gangs for years. But the police and the politicians not only turned a blind eye, they accused and shamed the victims and their families. Anand, we are living in an age of wokeism, victimhood, selectivity and political correctness, and I don't know if we are allowed to tell the truth anymore. And away from Britain, just 30 seconds, we have seen the very same perfidy being played out in India. Remember the horrendous Ajmer grooming case that was hushed up? Remember cases of love jihad that continue to be hushed up, continue to be called figment of one's imagination by journalists and opposition? Love jihad is a reality, Anand. Let me be very clear. Impersonating someone else's religion for the purpose of entrapping a woman, or coercing her to change her religion for the purpose of marriage, or for living out peaceful married life are criminal offenses. For the leftists and the logically challenged, most often one and the same thing. The means do not justify the end, where the end is an interfaith marriage, which by itself is a wonderful thing. Now you can bunch these three offenses under any phrase. Love jihad, groom jihad, it doesn't matter. What matters is, do these offenses happen? The answer is yes, by the hundreds.
It is with sincere regret, I have to say, I've run out of time. Everybody has so much to say on this. We underestimated the content which was required, or time was required, because this is a huge issue. With the promise that we will take this forward, we'll take this report forward into our Thursday edition, and with a sincere apology to General Pandey, and I seek his time again on Thursday, and we'll start with you, sir. I've run out of time. I will not be able to get your thoughts today. My sincere apologies to all our panelists. Viewers, we'll take this part 2 coming up on Thursday. Thank you very, very much.
Co-presented by This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
I want to begin by asking you about the tweets that you made in the aftermath of the Israeli strikes on Friday. I want to quote just a part of the tweet that you sent out. And you said, "Tonight, as I watched the news of Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, I felt a surge of hope, not for the destruction itself, but for the first glimmer of freedom for the people trapped under a government that gouges out women's eyes for their clothes and tortures dissidents for daring to think differently." Can I begin by asking you about your birth, your childhood in Iran, and why do you feel so strongly about what's happening today?
Absolutely, Shivani, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's an issue that's very close to my heart, and it's very close to the hearts of so many Iranians and Iranian-Americans, as well as Iranians. It's inside of Iran and elsewhere. I was born in Iran pre-revolution, at a time when Iran was almost a westernized sort of nation, an advanced culture, one that really celebrated art and music and intellectual freedom, one that produced poetry, fashion, where women were free to do anything they want, where people had freedom of speech for the most part, and where people were free to express themselves and be who they wanted to be. The revolution, which occurred when I was just a handful of years old, shattered all of that. It was something that was sold to many of the youth in the nation as something that would elevate them and create new opportunities. But as we know, it destroyed opportunities for basically everyone. And it caused my family to flee, because we're religious minorities as Jewish people, but so many others, even Muslim people, who didn't want to practice that type of more radical Islam that was imposed on everyone, similarly suffered. And now you have a population of people who has been suffering under a very oppressive regime for close to 5 decades. These are some of the smartest people on earth. These are people who remain very well educated, people who have a thirst for freedom, a thirst for self-expression, but who are physically and emotionally repressed at every turn. Plus, they have a government that prioritizes exporting terror to other countries over their own well-being and prosperity. And this is something that simply can't continue. And so when I wrote that, that came from my heart. It came out of really a hope that the people inside of Iran will be liberated from the people who are oppressing them and have been oppressing them for so many decades.
But what makes you confident that most of the Iranians today, including the majority Muslims, don't really like this regime? What makes you confident of that?
Yeah, it's actually pretty clear cut. First, the messages being posted online, the ones that get through, are overwhelmingly in support of what's happening against the Iranian regime. Remember, it's not against the people, it's against the regime. And second, when you look at what happened when Israel responded in Gaza to the October 7th attacks, within moments, within at least a day or so, there were large protests in the US by Muslim, Arab Americans, Palestinians in opposition to what was happening, even though it was a defensive operation. There was a direct attack by Gaza. There were calls of genocide, etc. You have a much larger Iranian population in the United States than you do Palestinian American. And guess what? There has not been one single protest. Why? Why is there that silence? Why is there support quietly and even in public? It's because this is not an offensive war. This is one where there are multiple goals, the nuclear program being one, but from the Iranian perspective, the people, it is one of liberation. It's one of being freed from the oppression that is happening through this current regime, one that will torture or kill women simply for not covering their hair sufficiently, one that will gouge a woman's eyes out if they wear eye makeup. This is lunacy. And I think they have a real desire to join the modern world, to rejoin the modern world. This is a country that was there at one point, even if people weren't alive at that time. And Iran is a very young country, right? So many people in their 20s and younger, disproportionate to many other countries, right? Even though it's so young and people didn't experience pre-revolution Iran, they know what happened, and now through the internet get to see what it's like everywhere else, and they're educated enough to understand what their country can be and what their lives can be like if they had some freedom and prosperity. And I think that's what all of them aspire to.
You know, there has been some statements made by both Israel and US that suggest that a regime change is something that they could be working on. Khamenei, the supreme leader, Israel hasn't denied that he's one of their targets or is on their target. Are you hoping that that would be one of the objectives achieved?
It would be very nice to see the regime change. That would be an amazing goal to occur. But I think we also have to be very realistic. Throughout that region, nearly every time that we have attempted to achieve regime change through outside military force, the change has sometimes been worse than what occurred before the change occurred, and right, and it creates a leadership vacuum. It creates chaos, and it creates an opportunity for a violent insurgency, much of which may be elements of the current regime that go into hiding, have access to weaponry and money and people, and then rise up against whatever the new leadership is. And so I think it's naive to think that you get an automatic flip overnight where you have a new regime immediately installed and things are peaceful.
Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. The war between Israel and Iran has now entered the 6th day today, and it is escalating with each passing day. Overnight, Israel sent another barrage of fighter jets to hit Iran, both in the capital Tehran as well as in the western parts. Israel's stated objective is to try and decapitate Iran's nuclear program. But is that easier said than done? In fact, the International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that one of the biggest enriching facilities that Iran has in Natanz, in the southern deserts, the Natanz enrichment site is severely damaged, maybe even permanently pushed back from that enriching capacity. But the biggest one is in Fordo, which is buried deep inside a mountain. And the only way that can be permanently decapitated is if America gets involved in this war. And that is the second big threat. Trump has warned Iran's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, to surrender unconditionally. Yesterday, as he left the G7, he issued a stark warning to everyone in Tehran, saying they should leave immediately. The United States is sending more aircraft carrier groups, as well as more shipping fleets towards the Gulf of Persia in a bid to try and get Iran to surrender. But Iran doesn't seem to be in any such mood. Today, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei addressed the nation and he asked America to back off. He in fact gave a history lesson saying the Iranian people have never surrendered on the back of Western aggression. He has asked both Iran and Israel to back off. Now, it boils down to a fundamental question. The objective with which Israel launched this offensive last Friday, was to try and push back Iran's nuclear program because Israel believed that Iran was within days of acquiring a nuclear weapon. But Now, has that objective also changed to the elimination of the supreme political and religious theocratic leadership of Iran? When will that objective be met? Will that objective at all be met? And most importantly, when will this war end? I'll be joined by a very, very special guest who will be joining me in a moment, the sitting Foreign Minister of Israel. But first, let me bring you up to speed with what has been happening, the latest in this ongoing situation between Israel and Iran. Just hours after Israel claimed that its operations could lead to a regime change in Iran, the United States voiced its support and called for Iran's unconditional surrender. Iran, in response, has announced that the battle has just begun and one can expect a strong response soon. This was part of the messaging from Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Israel continues to claim that Khamenei's death would end the conflict and not escalate it. That was a position first taken by Netanyahu a couple of days ago. The United States, meanwhile, has announced total and complete control over the skies above Iran, which basically means that they can fly fighter jets or drones or any other aerial vehicle through the skies of Iran without it being intercepted by Iranian air defenses. Iran, nonetheless, is still digging its heels in, saying that the Zionists will not be shown any mercy. Israel alleges that the very people of Iran want to throw out this theological regime, the theological thugs out. That is Israel's claim. The United States, on the other hand, has backed Israel's claim on Khamenei, saying that they are aware where the supreme leader is taking shelter at, but Iran says it won't be the one that is going to surrender. Following his early exit from the G7 in Kananaskis in Canada and Alberta, and of course some of the social media posts that he put out, Donald Trump has been claiming that something bigger than ceasefire is being worked upon. Now, what could that be? He was asked on board Air Force One and he said, I want an end. Not just a ceasefire, but I want an end to the war. It seems that the United States is finally left with no choice but to get its hands dirty, to get involved in this war, even though that is against Trump's political instincts. The U.S. aircraft carrier USS Nimitz is headed towards the Middle East. It's been moving from Southeast Asia to the Middle East. U.S. fighter jets have begun patrolling the Middle East in an attempt to protect American air bases there. America has dozens of air bases in the Middle East. It has about 40,000 U.S. troops currently stationed in different countries in the Middle East. U.S. fighter jets have also left a base in eastern England, again moving in the direction of the Middle East. 36 aerial refueling aircraft have also been diverted from Europe towards the Middle East, all sort of laying the ground, if you will, for the United States to get involved in this war. So is this an attempt by the US to protect its military interests in the area? And like I said, it has tens of bases there, 40,000 troops. Or is this a bid to try and back Israel and to try and protect Israel by essentially eliminating Iran's nuclear threat? The United States holds the largest military base in the region. It houses 10,000 personnel, jets, drones, and a lot more. This is at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The Camp Arif Jan, which is in Kuwait, holds about 13,000 troops. It's the second largest U.S. military base in the region. There's naval support activity in Bahrain, which houses the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet and approximately about 9,000 personnel. The Al Dhafta Air Base in the UAE hosts fighter jets like the F-22 Raptor. It also houses surveillance planes and drones. The Erbil Air Base in Iraq is used for air operations as well. So the U.S. has a number of air bases as well as military stations there in the Middle East, as well as thousands of personnel. Now, with the situation escalating with every passing moment, the focus is now shifted to troop mobilization. However, one cannot overlook the threat that Iran poses. For one, Iran is the patron saint of the various terror groups across the region, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas, a Shia Islamist militant group that is behind the attacks that we're seeing in the wider region, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Iraq, or even in mainland Israel. It continues to back Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These are Sunni Islamist groups that target Israel and its Western allies. The Al-Quds Force exports terror via proxy militia like the Kataib Hezbollah and the Houthis, who have been a real pain when it comes to the shipping lanes in the Red Sea. Iran even backed the Taliban during the US operations against Afghanistan through the 20-year war on terror. It also harbored al-Qaeda leaders, including Saif al-Adl and Osama bin Laden's family members, at the time when this war on terror was going on between 2001 and 2021. All right, I want to go across to a very special guest who's joining us. He's at the front and center of what is happening, the situation between Israel and Iran. The foreign minister, the Honorable Foreign Minister of Israel, is now joining us, Mr. Gideon Sar. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. First things first, please help our viewers understand what is Israel's ultimate objective in this war, which is now into its sixth day. Is it to end the Iranian regime, or is it to completely finish off Iran's uranium enrichment program?
Our aim is to remove a double existential threat. The threat is, of course, the Iranian nuclear program, which came very close to nuclear weapons, which, of course, we cannot allow to happen because this country is openly and publicly declare it want to destroy, it want to eliminate the state of Israel, and it also taking steps in that context. So this is simply impossible. And the second threat is ballistic missile program, which is already in huge numbers, but they have an intention to have a mass production, to have in a very short time 10,000 ballistic missiles. For a small country like Israel, it will be unbearable. So we went out and we took this historic decision as a last resort in the last minute in order to save ourselves from the risk of elimination. And this is what we had no choice but to do. We didn't put as an objective the change in the regime. We put as the objective the remove of the threats. And the issue of the regime can be a result, but it's not an objective. It's totally in the hands of the people in Iran.
Before you started this mission, what was the assessment given to you by your intelligence community as to how soon they believed Iran would procure a nuclear weapon? Because the American intel seems to suggest that it would have taken Iran perhaps years to procure a nuclear weapon.
No, that's not right. First of all, in terms of the enrichment, they are very advanced. They have enough materials for 9 atomic bombs before we started this operation. In terms of weaponization, they already also began to make a progress. And we thought that it might be an issue of 6 months, maybe less than that, until they can have a nuclear bomb. You always must take into consideration the fact that you cannot know everything, and this is very risky when you are at that point. After we saw that negotiations hadn't brought any results, after we saw that the IAEA report was clear that they are breaching their commitments, after the IAEA declared and stated that they are in a state of non-compliance, there was no reason to just to sit and wait that they will have atomic bombs. That would be a crucial mistake. So we acted in the right time. Maybe we acted too late, but we surely didn't act too early.
What do you want the role of the United States to be in this war between Israel and Iran? President Trump put out on social media some hours ago asking for unconditional surrender of the Iranians and the Iranian leader in particular. The Iranian leader has now responded. He has spoken in a televised address to the nation, and he said there's no question of surrendering.
First of all, the objective of the American administration is similar. They said very clearly that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They said that they are against Iranian enrichment. In context of what America will do, it's an American decision. We are not speaking on behalf of the US. We, as Israel, will do our utmost to prevent it. I can tell you that already what we did delayed this threat for a significant time. And we are only, I can only say that we are thankful for America in what they are doing in helping in defense. Other decision will be taken by President Trump.
What about the reports of mass casualties to civilians, not just in Iran, where the ministry there says more than 200 have died, but even in Israel, Israeli citizens, last time I checked, more than 24 had died.
We have casualties. You know why we have casualties? Because Iran, this criminal regime of Iran, is specifically targeting civilian population centers. They are killing children and old people deliberately. Today I was in a city called Bat Yam. There is no military facilities there. They just shooting at civilians. We are targeting objectives, targets of nuclear program, of the missiles program, military installations, and so on. It happens that there is collateral damage, but it is very small. We are doing our maximum that there won't be a collateral damage. But the difference is that they are targeting civilians and they are making mistake because they think it might influence the will of the Israeli people. I can tell you that the will of the Israeli people is they are strongly support this operation. Also, the opposition in Israel supporting this operation. So they will not be able to be successful with that criminal strategy.
What is the end point of this war? The Prime Minister was asked about it a couple of days ago, and he said if the leader of Iran were to be killed, that would be the end of the conflict. And you just said a moment ago that that's not an objective of your campaign. I want to know, when will this war end? What has to be achieved for this war to end?
I'll explain it. First of all, I said that the removal of this regime is not an objective we design. Our objectives are connected to their elimination plan, to their nuclear program, to their missiles program. And we have a very detailed plan. We worked very hard for a long time. We know what we want to hit, and it will be achieved when we will finish the mission, when we will finish the job. And the result will be that we are